Welcome back to another episode of Politics Unfiltered. Last week, I was talking about redistricting in Tennessee, redistricting across the country, and I promised y'all that we were going to continue that conversation and bring some people smarter than me into the dialogue to make sure that we were layering that conversation. So today, I am...
What that got to do with me? I don't like that lead in, man. Do this over. No, just...
let me say this because today I've got a great guest, Reverend Dr. Reverend Earl Fisher. Folks across Memphis, folks across West Tennessee, folks across this region, they know who he is, and they know how he steps in to bridge that gap between academia, faith. And being almost like a moral compass to the better social angels in us to require civil rights and social justice. I mean, he is somebody who has not been afraid to be on the front lines when it matters the most. And he's the founder of an organization, Up the Vote 901. So if you're listening, you're like, oh, why does he have a preacher on here? Well, he's also the founder of Up the Vote 901. But this moment I think requires Dr. Fisher. This moment I think requires more than just the typical. I was state party chair, so I know how the political consultant class sweeping in, try to give you the politically correct analysis of these moments. But this moment I think requires something more than just the typical traditional political perspective of what's going on in Memphis.
Sure.
Before we hop into it, did I miss anything in your bio that you want to make sure people know about you?
Well, a few things I will say, but first, thank you, brother. Thank you for the partnership and the brotherhood over the last several years. I mean, we've been in the trenches on some of these political developments, man. And so from your time leading even as party chair up until this point, I appreciate you being actively involved and engaged and in a, from what I could tell, a righteous way, brokering power that is beneficial to people in Memphis and Shelby County and Black folks who feel those reverberations. And so I appreciate this opportunity. Been looking forward to it for a while, brother. So all this is about to be for those of us those who are listening. They just gonna be listening in to our phone calls like our fireside chats. I am the pastor of Abyssinian Baptist Church in Whitehaven, Black Haven, which is affectionately referred to as the Blackest Church in Memphis and Shelby County. Anybody who want to contest us for the title, please bring it on. I am the proud husband of the love of my life, Denise Lloyd Fisher. We're about to celebrate 17 years of marriage and 20 years of relationship later this year. I have a son, Jalen. I have a granddaughter, Carter. I am Claudie Mae Fisher's son. I am Tierney's little brother, even though I'm taller than her and way more than her. She's 2 years older than me. And so I am a proud graduate of the Lamonoan College, where for the last year I have served as the assistant professor of religious communication and Africana studies in the inaugural dean of chapel. But above all,
see, that's what I'm talking about. When I say, it's people that's smarter than you, you got to bring them up. This is what I'm talking about.
There's a whole lot of people who got those kind of reference points, but that doesn't necessarily make them smart. Now, I'm not saying it makes me smart either. I'll leave that to the intellectuals to pontificate over that in a very superfluous way. But Up the Vote 901 was founded in 2018. We actually started laying the groundwork for it in 2016 after the election that shocked the world, because most of us felt like it was going to be Hillary over Trump. And when Trump won, I became very curious as a faith leader, as a citizen, and as a scholar of social justice and Black movement and, politics. Like what made that happen?
Yeah.
And so I started digging into some of the turnout numbers. And I found out that some of the lowest turnout precincts were Black churches, prominent Black churches, with people who I got wonderful relationships with that I think are doing some excellent pastoral work, but there was some gaps. So you talked earlier about filling some gaps and stuff like that. And so I think since 2018, when we formally launched Up the Vote 901, up until this point, we've been impactful and influential in getting more power, information, and representation for more people and doing the best we can to increase voter turnout in Memphis and Shelby County. And I think if I was in the Black church, we would say if we ever needed the Lord before, we sure do need him now. If we ever needed increased turnout before, I mean, with what has happened over the last few weeks, I think we all could agree we sure do need it now.
Let me ask something, because I've been thinking about this as I was preparing for this conversation, and I try to cut it straight shoot it straight, try to keep as unfiltered as I can with people. We've seen the National Guard in the city,
right?
We've seen all of the alphabet law enforcement agencies,
alphabet boys
in the city. We've seen the state not make investments in the city. And I'm thinking about this moment of chaos that's been injected into the political climate in this city. And let me just ask a direct question. Do you think that, we're seeing what we're seeing almost as a punishment politically for Memphis being the majority Black city?
Oh yeah, I think it's definitely some backlash. And that kind of backlash is not limited to Memphis, even though Memphis has been, in a lot of ways, a prima facie case, as they would say in law, or ground zero for the way that has manifested. But you've seen attacks on Black cities. Chicago is demonized by the Trump administration. Baltimore is demonized. We've seen what's happening in New Orleans. If we even start talking about the Louisiana versus Calais case, I mean, that's part of like the New Orleans corridor, right? So you've seen that. However, I think in tandem with the backlash, I think it may have been, who was it? I don't know if it was Van Jones. Somebody called it a white lash, which has been happening since 2008. I think we are also reaping what we have sown in some of our political apathy and political arrogance.
Let me ask something though, because I was talking to someone and he mentioned to me, he said he's an older guy in his 80s. He said, for a long time to him, Memphis has been like this, it's been very passive when it comes to people being able to come in and kind of shoulder us the way that they want to push us in the directions that they want to push us in without a lot of pushback from folks here. Now, I'm not old enough to know how that, really was in the civil rights movement besides, what I've seen and what I've heard. But I know in modern times, folks are pushing back.
Right.
Do you think in this grand moment that this city being targeted or Memphis being targeted in a way, I don't want.
I think I don't
want to piss too many people off. I don't want people to think I'm targeting them, but I want to shoot it straight. Do you think the folks who are leading the city, the folks who are in charge, the people who are out front, do you think that they've almost been pushovers? Like,
I think somebody like
and
Paul
hasn't
Young,
made it easy. And
I think somebody like Paul Young, for instance, who I've had direct conversations with, has a level of benevolence that has put us at a disadvantage. I've had this conversation with him, right? And so I don't think that he's being, in his mind, some pushover, right? And I'm not saying that he hadn't stood up or fought back in his way, in a moderate way, which I think is true to his political disposition. I do think it has us at an advantage, what I've told him before and what I've told several others. I'm just using him as, I think he's the most high profile kind of like case. And neither one of us are going to demonize him, even if we are criticizing some of his political maneuvers. So again, I'm not saying nothing here that I have not said to him directly and had some kind of thorough dialogue about. I said to him, I'm not asking you to go out there and start a fight, but I am telling you to recognize when you win one.
Yeah.
And so I do think that for some of us, we have been a little bit acquiescent because we are banking on, the reference you made earlier was to the greater angels of our nature. Yeah, and I just don't know how beneficial that has been to us. Some might argue that a moderate maneuver would somehow buffer even worse kind of backlash. To which I say, well, if that kind of crossover appeal, reach across the aisle, benevolence was worth anything, why couldn't nobody call the state legislature and say, please don't do this to District 9?
Exactly.
Right. And so that's where I stand on it. I do think it has put us at a disadvantage, but I don't want to just freeze the frame in this snapshot of what has happened over the last few months or even the last few years, when you start talking about the civil rights movement. I'm 47. I'll be 48 in September. And I get to Memphis in 1999. And so I still hear some of the musings and reflections of what it was like at the height of the civil rights movement or the Black Power movement. But be clear, by the time I'm here, there's not a lot of political grassroots activity that we would deem militant or radical.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't hit really across the South, you could say, until the Gina 6 around 2006 in Louisiana, for those who wanted to do some quick kind of like historical dives. But then it arrives in Memphis. Black Lives Matter movement kicks off Trayvon Martin 2012, but that really don't even hit in Memphis like that. Mike Brown, closer, St. Louis 2014, a little bit more. And then in 2015, when Darius Stewart is killed in Memphis by Officer Connor Schilling, I think you see something really kind of take off. I remember having a conversation, and I was actually doing an interview with one of the local news stations with Reverend Dr. Hutchinson, who has been, an elder, statesman, faith leader, political journalist, has been doing his own radio show, talk show, that sort of stuff for quite some time. And we were doing an interview, and he said, prior to this is around 2014, 2015. He said, prior to this, Memphis was really sleepwalking.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that there was a lot of political. I'm not saying that there was none, because people are going to think, people would take
discredit.
Right.
Yeah,
right. I'm not doing it.
Earl Fisher was discredited.
Yeah, which I'm not. But because if there was somebody who I wanted to discredit, I'd say it explicitly. And I can say confidently, the political activity that was taking place was and still is inadequate. Yeah. And I'm saying even the political activity I'm involved in, it's clearly inadequate, because I couldn't stop it, and my efforts couldn't stop it. But it was definitely inadequate. There was some activity there, but it has consistently ramped up and increased and intensified in some real beautiful and complicated ways over the last several years.
Yeah. Let me ask this. Because I just spoke of civil rights as if it was a past tense.
Yeah.
The civil rights movement as people know it.
The classical.
Yeah, the classical civil rights movement. Yes, that was a time, but it has evolved. Civil rights is still an issue.
Yes.
Right now, what we're seeing with these maps is a direct blow to what was gained from the civil rights movement.
Yes.
Do you think that the evolution of the civil rights movement, have we done enough on the social side to kind of highlight the evolution of the civil rights movement, so that young people and even some older folks who talk about what was gained during their younger years or yesteryear, that fight is still a fight, it's just got a new face?
So 2 things. One, I recently wrote something. I wrote a lot of op-eds recently. So I don't know if this was the one I did in MS Now, or the one I did in the Tennessee Lookout, or the one I did for Truth Out. But I've described what we are dealing with now as not Jim Crow 2.0, but Jim Crow 3.0, aka James Crow Esquire. Because it's a lot more sophisticated now. But the week after the special session, on that following Monday, the NAACP convened a town hall at First Baptist Broad. Shout out to Dr. Keith Norman, and shout out to President Gloria Sweetlove, who convened it. It was a panel. They asked me to come and speak on the panel. And one of the points I made there is pertinent to the thing that you're raising now. I quoted what I heard Maxine Smith, who used to be the president of the NAACP Memphis branch, and also the president of Memphis' branch of the SELC. In 2008, she gave a keynote at the National Civil Rights Museum. It was a convention that gathered in commemoration of Dr. King's assassination 40 years later. Somebody asked her why we hadn't made more progress in 40 years. And she said this. So if y'all quote her, I didn't say this, I'm quoting Maxine Smith. She said, some of it is my generation's fault, because we got too comfortable with a Cadillac in the driveway, a house on the hill, and some steak and potatoes on our plate, and we forgot to tell the story of the struggle. And so my conclusion from that is, right now we are at a disadvantage, and I'm concerned because we are expecting people to fight who we never trained to fight.
Yeah. Because
some of us said the fight was over.
Yeah.
But really what has been happening is the fight has evolved and morphed and switched. And now they don't say, I think this was Lee Atwater, with the Southern strategy saying you don't say nigga, nigga, nigga now. Now you say forced busing, or now you say the buzzwords.
Speaking all the buzzwords.
Yeah, so now it's public safety.
Yeah.
Or
AKA
urban renewal.
AKA violent black people.
Yeah. So that's what I think has become the current manifestation of that long freedom struggle that has been part and parcel of black folks' lot in these yet to be United States since we got here.
If you listen to the podcast, I know you're probably thinking, when are we going to get to the guts of redistricting? And we're going to get there, but we got to make sure that we got to set the stage for what we're dealing with the people that we're dealing with, and how a certain group of folks, people have taken advantage of for the most part. Let me ask you this. You're on a college campus. I mean, most young folks in the city, they know your church, they know your faith-based teachings, and you're like a convener for a lot of folks. A lot of people trust you on the politics of it, on the faith piece of it. Do you think that young people are you seeing something different in young people in this moment? I know we saw the video of Representative Justin Pearson at the state capitol when state troopers were trying to arrest his brother, and that moment went viral. And I saw a lot of young people, resharing it and talking about how that's what we needed more of. Do you think there's a shift in what we're seeing with young people?
I wouldn't call that a shift. I mean, if anything, it's a reclamation. I mean, study the invaders in Memphis. These were young people that were engaged in that militant kind of behavior. The Black Power movement, the Black Panther Party, those are young people. At the time, SNCC, right? The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, that were integrating lunch counters and stuff like that. These were not some passive kind of kumbaya organizations. I mean, they were extremely militant in their own right. And if you go back and look at the histories, these are some of the exact same types of confrontations that were captured then, but kind of faded into the background as we were remixing and revising and whitewashing what actually got us the progress that we still long for. The same kind of progress that has been being rolled back over the last several years, decades actually, because like I know, as soon as the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965, there was a strategy to gut it. And they just, played the long game. They stacked the Supreme Court because, again, I talked earlier about some of our political apathy and arrogance. It's like some of us took for granted what it took for us to get the rights. So we stopped fighting to protect the rights.
Yeah.
The whole while, as we are articulating the talking points of misinformation that have been injected into our psyche by our enemies, we started saying our vote don't matter who you vote for, both sides are the same. And I'm not saying that either side has been adequate, but it is clear when you start talking about our issues, who has been for the last 60 years more closely aligned with the vision most black folks have for the world.
Look, when I became state party chair, I think a lot of people looked at me and they were like, here's a young black guy. He's from Memphis. He's going to be able to go out. He's going to be able to rally young people, especially young black people, back into the political fold. And I used to try to caution them that, whether you're a young black or an old black, young white, progressive liberal, once you're a part of the establishment. And especially if you're leading the establishment, there's going to be moments and places, regardless of what your demographic is, that you're just going to people are going to automatically have this paranoia about resistance on, can this person get in this space? And that's why I believe right now, it is increasingly important for coalitions that can reach, especially young people, especially young black people, coalitions that can reach people to be activated at the highest level, because there's going to be some stuff that the politicians and the party just can't accomplish. And I guess the bigger question is this. And you're on a college campus. You got young folks in your congregation. Young people are looking towards you as a voice and for wisdom in this moment. Do you think young people trust the political system anymore? And should they? Should they, based on kind of the structure and how things are playing out now?
So I think that there is a kind of righteous antagonism that most young people leverage towards the establishment, the system, the political infrastructure, because the realities of it over the last several years, last several decades at the very least, have proven themselves to be woefully inadequate for what Black folks need. And so at the same time, because there has been such miseducation and a lack of political and civic education, I think there is some undue criticism that is hyperbolic. So they'll say stuff like, ain't no politician ever did nothing for me. Well, who picking your trash up?
Yeah.
Who built the school building that you went to? How did the teachers get paid? I know that there are far too many potholes, but some of them done been patched up, right? Like, how did that happen? Like, so again, that disconnect in terms of process with personality, which is usually what they see, because they've been presented people who we were told would be our political saviors.
Yeah.
And so now you're telling us, get behind so-and-so. And then you get behind so-and-so, and you don't know enough about the process that so-and-so has to be now engaged in. And so let's just take Obama, for instance. Yes, Obama was supposed to be the political savior for Black folks. That was wrong, but that was what it was. Nevertheless, not realizing if you don't protect the supermajority in the midterms, then you actually handicap this star child Obama.
Yeah.
And now he's 2 years in and spending the rest of his time on defense because somebody like Mitch McConnell stood up and said right out the gate, our plan is to make sure he's a one-term president. So they were working from day one.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, we were like, hey, no, we good. He in now. He'll save it. He'll do it. They do the pastors like that all the time. Whole lot of church work need to be done. Rev will do it. Doc could do it, And so that's what I think puts us at a disadvantage. And young people are articulating much more the criticism of the lack of follow through or sufficiency from the personality, but they are relatively ignorant of the political processes, how a bill becomes a law, what's happening with their tax dollars, who represents you beyond just from a federal standpoint or the presidential level. And so our job, what I've considered to be a significant part of my calling over the last several years, is giving people access to the information and increasing their power and representation so they have a better understanding of when blame needs to be leveled on somebody. Let's pick the right person.
Yeah.
Let's pick the right people. Let's pick the right group.
And it's like, I think there's such an underinvestment in civics, just the basics of civics. I mean, I'd like to see a county government or a city government that's allocating, $500,000 to $1 million in their budget just to focus on civic engagement.
Yeah.
Voter turnout from a nonpartisan perspective.
Y'all can send that money to us to vote nonpartisan.
I was gonna say there's organizations that can help do the work, but I think with voter apathy where it is, and with so many people tuned out of the political space, the need for the government to step in to fill that void, especially in this moment, to talk to people about how important being engaged in this process is extremely important. And I think it's to an advantage. So, if you're an elected official, you're not chasing the same 50,000 voters in every election and losing.
Well, but your people have become comfortable in doing that.
I know.
And put us further behind the curve because, and I guess I get the sentiment of this is the game that needs to be played, but that also has been part of why young people and some not so young have that kind of animus and disengagement with the system, because it's like, well, you feel like it's better, not you, but a candidate feels like it's better for them to just try to win 50% of 50,000 than 50% of 500,000. Now recognizing if you get 50% of the 500,000, it's more likely that you are now representing the will of the majority of the people.
That's true. So you're gonna have to come back on here. We're gonna have to talk about civics deeper. But let's switch gears and let's talk about redistricting. I now live in the 5th congressional district. Almost 10 years ago, when I moved to Nashville, I lived in the 5th congressional district when Jim Cooper was the congressman. Redistricting happened. I was put into the 7th congressional district. When I moved back home a year or so ago, I was in the 9th congressional district. After these new maps and this mid decade cycle,
midterms.
I call it the Trump redistricting initiative. I'm back in the 5th congressional district, 300 miles away from where I started. 200 miles away from where I started. It's like, Jesus Christ. What in the world are we witnessing right now?
We are witnessing a political power grab, and some might even call it, like one commentator said, this is the political death rattle of the Confederacy. We are witnessing the Southern strategy reincarnated. We are witnessing some unapologetic kind of fascist, white supremacist, white nationalist overreach in ways that has pulled the rug off of what was a much more subtle, maybe even a much more sophisticated kind of politics from folks on the right. So now they are saying the quiet part all loud. We want to use every measure to protect the president from losing too many seats during the midterm, because we fear that if he loses the House and the Senate, then impeachment is inevitable.
Because he's a
criminal.
And if he wasn't a criminal, if they weren't corrupt, then that wouldn't be at the forefront of their thing.
Right.
Like, why would you have to be trying to protect him from impeachment if he's not doing anything that's impeachable?
I think there's some truth there. I think much more, they are much more inspired by the fact that he has given them access to political power.
Yeah.
I don't think they so caught up in, we know he was corrupt, so we got to cover him. It's like, no, regardless of his morality or immorality, right? He gives us access to political power, relatively unbridled and unchecked, as long as we massage his egomaniacal impulses. And so that is what they are after. And for too many of us, we are afraid to talk about political power.
Yeah.
It is something that we relinquish. And I think I heard the late great, my fraternity brother.
We got a litmus test on folks who can and can't be a part of the power structure.
Yeah. and so I think it was Dr. Joseph Lowry who said, just because government doesn't do, doesn't mean government ought not do.
Yeah.
But we've been fed, some by black nationalists, some by black conservatives, some by anti-black folk, and some well-meaning folks. Like, you can't rely on the government to do everything. Yeah, so that is true. And let's play this out. Right? Because I'm going to be taxed against my will. I don't have a right to say, I'm not paying gas tax. I'm not paying tax on clothing. I'm not paying taxes on groceries. For those of us who own a home, right? Like you are taxed.
And if you don't pay federal tax, you're going to jail.
You're going to jail. Right. So that money is going somewhere. Now you're telling me I should not hold people accountable for distributing that money in a way that is equitable and impactful in my community. What I need to do then is pull myself and my community up by my own bootstraps while still paying into the system, and then sit back and get double taxed. And now if we look at the maps that the way they are, this would actually be double taxation without representation.
Yeah.
So that's the quandary we find ourselves in.
Now, there's been a lot of people out there, and I say blatant ignorance. There have been a lot of folks out there, conservatives, MAGAs, who, think there's a lady here in the 9th Congressional. Let me ask you this first. Are you in a new district, or are you still in?
I'm in 9.
You're still in 9. Is the church in a new district?
It's in 9.
All right. So you're still in 9.
But of course, that means now instead of me just being able to talk to the congregation about District 9,
you got to talk to them about.
I got to talk about 9, 8, and 5 because now I got people in Midtown, they in 8.
Yeah.
I got people in Boxtown, they in 5.
Yeah.
But a few weeks ago,
you just talked about.
Let's talk about 9.
Yeah. Look, there's a lady here in Shelby County, Charlotte Bergman. I think that's how you pronounce it, Bergman or Bergman. This woman has been running for Congress. Black woman, very conservative woman, has been running for Congress in the 9th Congressional District against Steve Cohen multiple election cycles. Yep. She's one of the folks who are running on the Republican side against Brent Taylor or Memphis or Mr. Make Memphis Matter. She's running against this guy on the Republican side. But Republicans are using this whole thing. I mean, they try to go out here and it pisses me off. Excuse my language, Reverend.
No, man, you should talk more candid than that.
But they piss me off.
It's elementary. You need a real cuss word.
Because they go out here and they make this argument that, well, you know, Black people in the 9th Congressional District, they're whining because they want the maps to be racist for them. They have a Black woman that they can go out and vote for. And what these people fail to realize is that it's not about voting for a Black person. Mm-hmm. It's about Black people. Yes, obviously, I think we should have a Black Congress person from this area because we're majority Black. Yep. But it's not necessarily about voting for a Black person. It's about making sure that if a majority Black district decides that it wants an Asian, a Hispanic, a white, or Black representative,
we should be able to choose.
We have the right to choose it. And these folks have this misunderstanding that, they're mad because they're getting rid of, an older white Jewish guy and they've got to get a Black, and there's a Black woman who's running out there. It's not about that.
They know that. I don't think that. So that's a misdirection that they run, right? Because they don't want to keep the main thing the main thing. And another thing I learned about Trump Republicans is that generally whatever they accuse people of is what they're guilty of.
Yeah.
So it's not that we want a Black person as much as it is we want to be able to choose whoever to represent us. But for them, they want a white person. And here's how you know. You brought up Charlotte Bergman. I was having this conversation with Alex Coleman on WRIG a couple of weeks ago. Clearly, they don't want Charlotte Bergman in District 9 because they could have just kept running her.
Yeah.
But they want a white congressman, which is why Brent Taylor, hours after Governor Lee signs redistricting in the law.
No, minutes.
Yeah, well,
minutes. You're trying to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Right. Before the ink was dry.
Yeah.
Says, and ta-da, I'm running.
Yeah.
So often what they accuse people of is what they're guilty of. And even their logic around the map and its redistricting is rooted in a lie, number one. And furthermore, definitely doesn't criticize white districts the same way it criticized and scrutinized Black districts.
Yeah.
So the only race that needs to be split is the Black one.
Yeah.
But here's why it's rooted in a lie. At least two reasons. One, District 9, as you probably know, was never some civil rights district. It was a district that Harold Ford Sr. won when it was still majority white. And then as white flight began to advance, the city and the district became more and more Black until I believe the late 80s or the early 90s when Memphis finally became a majority Black city. People act like Memphis was majority Black in 1950. That's not the case. But further, their argument that this should better represent the whole state, that the state is somehow ruby red, is a lie. You should know the numbers. The registered people in parties, 33% registered Republicans in the state of Tennessee. 33%. That's 1/3. 18% registered Democratic, and then 48% independent. So there's no way that this is somehow representative of a state where there are 9 congressional seats and all of them need to be ran by white people.
Yeah. I mean, if you just look at the numbers in themselves, there's this consistent 30+% of Democrats who are voting in every election. Come hell or high water, there's going to be at least 30-some%. There should be at least 3 Democratic congressional seats in this state.
I don't disagree.
Period. There should be at least 3. But somehow they've decided to split the majority Black district into 3. Kind of similar to what they did in Nashville, but it wasn't necessarily Nashville based on a majority minority district
Right.
as it is in Memphis, because Memphis is a true majority minority district.
That's right.
The stripping of representation from people in Memphis is unequivocally a voter suppression tactic.
Yes.
Because now, even if you're a Black candidate running in the congressional districts 8, 5, or 9, you've got to try to go out and connect with folks out in a rural part of the state.
Yep.
Way more than a rural candidate
would have to come
to the city and do. Because they could just stay out in rural counties and rack up the numbers without ever having to come into the city.
Right.
And we run this risk, very similar to Nashville, where you run this risk of the congressman representing the metro area of the city.
With the majority of the people.
With the majority of the people not being from that area,
Right.
not having any connection to that area, and not giving a damn
Right.
about what
That's a better color. Now you're coming to mind like, come on.
And not giving a damn about what happens in that area. And that's what people are up. That's what people
that's the lack of representation.
Are fearful of.
Yeah.
Because it's coming.
Yeah.
I mean, it's coming. If we end up with someone from Pulaski, Giles County over Pulaski, where the Ku Klux Klan were formed at, representing Memphis.
Yeah.
The chances of that person really caring about an impoverished neighborhood in Memphis are probably slim to none.
I mean, the same is true if a Brent Taylor wins.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you probably say the same thing.
You mean to tell me he gonna have Black Haven on his mind?
Yeah.
Or South Memphis? Or Orange Mound? Or Westwood and Boxtown? Or these majority Black neighborhoods that are victims of the disinvestment that has taken place at the federal, state, and local level for far too long? I mean, no, right? And so, again, this is the political power grab that we were discussing. It is their desire to be able to exploit the political resources, the financial resources, the material resources, the natural resources, and leverage them towards people who look like them. And they are often concerned that if Black folks get in power, they're going to do the same thing that white folks do when white folks is in power. When the reality is, part of the reason we have a political disadvantage is because when Black folks get in power, typically Black folks try and look out for everybody.
Yeah. And we think about some of the poorest parts of the state. Think about the folks living in Appalachias. Think about, folks living up in places like Clay County. Some of the poorest parts of the state with leadership that isn't diverse at all. Congress folks that aren't diverse at all. People clinging for life in some of these places because they can't afford to live. They can't afford just the basics. Don't have health care, don't have hospitals, don't have federal funding to help with anything.
Yeah.
And we're counting on those same people to somehow work magic inside of a city like Memphis.
Listen, I'll be honest with you. I think this is part of the complicated calculations that have been made that have put us in this predicament. And I identify as independent. I'm in that 48%. I'm just not a fool when I start thinking about where my issues are and who is most closely aligned with it. But I know this to be a fact, and I'm sure you do too. To the people who are in some of these rural counties that you just mentioned, they clearly have more in common with some of us in Black and impoverished and underprivileged communities than the folks who are representing them in these highfalutin, establishment-oriented, multi-million-dollar budget accessed offices.
Yeah.
If I was in some of those counties and I was a white person, I would do what they've been telling us to do. I would protest. I would not vote. Because, let's just be honest, over the last 20 years, the state of Tennessee has been run by the Republicans, mostly with a supermajority. So if somebody don't like gas prices, you got to put that on the Republicans. They did that. If you don't like your education system, that's on the Republicans. You don't like your wages, that's on the Republicans. You don't like your health care, that's on the Republicans. So they might not be crossing over to vote Democratic. But if I was them, I'd sit out. I'd chill. I'd be like, nah, like you're going to have to do more for me. And I wish we could actually form some of these wide-ranging coalitions across the state and get more adequate representation and more adequate allocation of the political resources. Doesn't seem to be the case because for too often, and for too long and for too many, they are much more bound by their racial identity and their whiteness. At least they feel like they ain't a Negro, right? Than they are looking at the concrete realities that the party in power have been implementing that have so many people across this state living in poverty.
Let me ask a question, because I know you're part of this collective of black
faith leaders,
black faith leaders who are trying to, build out a coalition that can not just impact this region where the 9th congressional district is split up, but try to hopefully take that statewide or at least run it up to where the districts end. Do you think that type of effort right now is going to be impactful as we turn our sights towards November and try to mobilize people?
Yeah, I think it's going to be impactful. How impactful it's going to be remains to be seen. But I think the most basic strategy is just leaning into the concrete numbers and the realities of the 1.7 million voters who didn't vote in the presidential election.
Yeah.
Right? So you may have had 3 million people in the state of Tennessee who cast their vote. You had 1.7 million that did not. 300,000 of them in Shelby County, 240,000 in Davidson County, 100,000 in Knox County, right? And so these are places where you would think if you can get clergy actively engaged in canvassing their congregations, if you can get people more in tune with what it means to educate people on the issues, not just hand them a ballot and say, vote for these candidates, but say, hey, here are the issues that are important to us. Here's where people stand. Here are the people who are most likely to give you the things that you are aspiring for politically. And then I think if we can do that aggressively, especially if, there's adequate resourcing behind it. I mean, I know Jesus fed 5,000 with 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread, but I don't think you're going to increase voter turnout on fish dinners and prayer breakfasts. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think there has to be some robust investment. But when you look at the numbers, Hendrell, you know this as well as anybody, the numbers are there. And what I would hope everybody would want, but it is clear that people on the right don't want, is as many people to vote as possible.
Yeah. Let me ask this. You're in District 9. Of all the congressional districts out there, there's going to be a Democratic primary and Republican primary. The Democratic primary and District 9 is probably looking like it's probably going to be the most contentious or most competitive, because you got 2 well-known state leaders now trying to vow to become the Democratic nominee in the 9th congressional district. But we look at some of the other districts where there's some decent candidates who are also running. I've heard people say that, it's a foregone conclusion that if a Democrat's going to win one of these 3 seats, they would have to reinvent themselves in a way that they're almost unrecognizable to the values of the Democratic Party, that even though there's parts of Memphis in that district, you're going to have to talk more about what people in rural and suburban parts of the state can grip around. I think, this high cost of gas.
Yeah.
The unaffordability at the grocery stores, not having health care. Yeah. I think all of these basic survival
table issues,
these kitchen table issues, should be driving the conversation, and not, if you believe DEI, which is important, but if you believe DEI should be the primary conversation, or do you want to restrict guns at the top of the issue? I think right now, you don't have to reinvent yourself to talk about the struggle that people are going through right now.
I think the last thing an elected official should do, especially in the middle of a campaign cycle, is try to reinvent yourself.
Yeah.
What people are after on any side of the aisle is your authenticity. Correct. What makes people stand down in the voting process is that they feel like they can't trust the candidates. Yeah. So I'd rather somebody come to me and say, hey, I don't have no plans on putting no money in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
I'm going to put it over in this. I could respect, if Brent Taylor was honest about that, I would respect him more.
Yeah.
But he's not honest about that, right? So he's disingenuous. And so outside of the wardrobe, you know what I'm saying? Whether it is Brent Taylor's hat and no tie and rolled up sleeves, whether it is Justin Pearson's afro and dashiki and black power material, right? Regardless of that, what you want is people to be authentic. I think what Justin is doing is authentic. I think what Brent Taylor is doing is much more manufactured.
Yeah.
Now both of them, because politics are performative, I'm not mad at somebody performing something publicly.
Yeah.
I am disappointed when whatever they are performing is inauthentic.
Yeah.
And I think the average voter feels that way. So do I think that any candidate needs to be speaking to people across these counties and across these demographics? Absolutely. As a person with a PhD in communications, I do know that there are certain touchstones that you need to have conversations about with certain groups that might not land the same in another group.
Yeah.
Right? And that's just the reality. But to your point, I will stand by this. When you start talking about the price of gas, when you start talking about healthcare, when you start talking about the educational system, and when you start talking about people's wages, right? Like that is a conversation that people should be willing to have on the merits. And when you have that conversation with objective data, then you realize that the people on the right side of the aisle have been woefully responsible for the inadequacies in those different sectors over the last 20 years in the state of Tennessee, for sure.
Yeah. Let me ask this, because I'm sure people are going to be looking to you, or not just to both you personally because of your stature in the community, but also to your organization, Up to Vote 901, because you all do a lot, of trying to help people get a better glimpse into the folks who are running for office. Have you arrived at a point or on any of these candidates? And I've endorsed a candidate, one of the guys, Chaz Mulder in the 5th Congressional District. I hadn't really talked much about the other districts yet, but I'll probably get there. Have you arrived at a point, or has the organization arrived at a point where we're saying this is the kind of candidate that I'm going to be looking for, or this is the candidate that we're looking for?
Me and C.J. Walter Crawford, who's the Chief Operations Officer, who have a lot of knockdown drag-outs about all kind of topics. We literally been discussing this back and forth for the last couple of days. Typically, when we do a slate of candidates, it is actually just the results of a mock election.
Yeah.
And we list who won because we have convened hundreds of people over a period of time and allowed them entree and access into the different candidates so that they could decide for themselves who they feel like best represents them. And so we do that mock election, then we publish the results, and we just share that with the different outlets. Like, hey, we convene this process. So it's never been a, hey, I think so-and-so, or CJU thinks so-and-so, or our 4 or 5 or 14 or 15 person committee get together. That has never been the case for us. We've convened a group. That does not mean that sometimes I don't have my personal picks, but what I share is what the public have said, what the people have said. Because of the nature of this one, we haven't had the opportunity to put that kind of process together.
Yeah.
And now we got to focus so much on the voter turnout overall, we probably won't be able to put that process together. I just believe that there are candidates that are more viable than others. This is me personally. And this is not me throwing shade at any other candidate. I done talked to several of them, right? I think right now when you start looking at name recognition, you start looking at the amount of money, you start looking at the ground game, when you look at the span of time, then I think you got Justin in 9 with the best chance to win. No shade to London Lamar, who I think is a solid sister, who I've had direct, and what I'm saying to you, I've said to her, right? And I think she has every right to run. I wish, I've had this conversation with her. I wish, and I know I'm being naive in this regard, but this is something that I've done in my own personal life, in my pastoral life, right? I wish that people would put a communal aspiration above a personal aspiration. And so we saw this happen with Cohen. I think Cohen came to a point where he said, personally, it's just not in my best interest to run. I would like to see him go out and champion these other candidates. I would like to see him support Heidi Coon in 8.
Yeah.
I would like him to support Chaz Mulder in 5. I think if you start talking about a trilogy of candidates, if you will, that can collaborate, and when you start thinking about, again, name recognition, ground game, who could put people out in Giles County today?
Yeah.
Who could put people out in Murray County today, or Carroll County today, or Knox County today? Now, some people might be talking about the money that they're going to raise, and they could, right? And this is a primary. A lot of people don't understand this.
Yeah.
So this is a quick civics thing, too. We had a meeting this morning with some faith leaders, and I was explaining some of this, right? As we are trying to get faith leaders educated, activated, mobilized to canvass their congregations. You hear people talk about the split vote. In a primary, there's really no split vote, right? The primary is when the party gets an opportunity to select who, through a political and electoral process, is going to represent the party in the general election. The disadvantage here is that because of the redistricting, and I'm pretty sure the people on the right knew this, you're dealing with a short window of time. And so somebody like Justin has been campaigning, go District 9, I'm going District 9, for over a year. Yeah. Everybody else, now you got to try to scramble. I mean, Chaz, I think, was doing 5, right? For however long. And then now your 5 is just expanded, or Justin's 9 is just shape-shifted, right? But for somebody just announcing, now you got to try to make up all of this lost ground. And now you're going to be angling August. And then after August, then you pivot to November. What I wish your party would do, right? Because I can respect the contextual realities of the moment. I can respect the political processes. You see, I just explained. I understand why there's a primary. There should be a primary. And it's not a split vote. A split vote would be something that would happen in a general election that is nonpartisan, where you end up with several different candidates in one demographic and then one candidate in the opposite demographic. That's when you split a demographic vote. In this instance, you wish,
especially like in city races.
Like the mayoral race in times past. And now, thankfully, you at least got to win 50%.
Yeah.
But I wish your party would convene all of your constituents. And hold
on a second. If you're listening to this podcast, if you're out there and you're listening to this podcast, to the folks who are running the state party, to the state party chair, I know she listens in sometimes. Okay. If you're listening to this podcast, this message is from Earl Fisher directly to you.
That's right. Look. In the words of Jay-Z, let's end the speculation. I'm talking to all of y'all. Okay, you should convene the people in your party, put together a collective slate that can help you start advocating now for turnout in August and November. But if somebody has to waste resources in a primary trying to prove themselves only to find themselves at the disadvantage in August, then, hey, my responsibility is increasing turnout as best as I can. My responsibility is doing all I can to give people access to the information that helps them make the decision that is in their best interest.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we are at a disadvantage if somebody is going to spend the next 4 months trying to win in August. You're spending money. You have to adjust and amend your schedule. God forbid, we in a situation, we in a moment and a season politically where people don't seem to be mature enough to pivot after a primary.
Yeah.
So,
or politically astute enough.
Yeah. Yes. I think being politically astute means you have a level of maturity.
Yeah.
I would say spiritual maturity, ideological maturity, emotional maturity, where you say, hey, this is my preferred candidate. My preferred candidate didn't win. This is the person that represents the party that is most closely aligned with my interests. I'm voting for this person. But in this climate, it's like, if my candidate don't win, I'm not voting.
Yeah.
And so you run the risk of some of that happening, especially if the primary gets tested.
I want to cover 2 more areas before I let you go today. There are people out there who are looking at this moment, and yes, we live in this 24-hour news cycle, short-lived attention span reality. People are tuned in right now. They hear what's going on. They see what's happening in Tennessee and Louisiana and South Carolina and Georgia and all these places, Alabama, Mississippi, all these places in the South. To the folks in Tennessee who are looking at this moment, do you think that number one, do you think that enough people are concerned and enough people are tuned in? And do you think their attention will last long enough for us to actually be able to make a difference in this election?
Man, that's a trick question. I think my most honest answer is that's a toss-up. And that's why our work is so valuable and important in a moment like this. I think the average person has been socially engineered to be numb to some of the political realities because it benefits the people in power. Earlier, I mentioned how we've been fed misinformation and talking points. So you have some of the most disinfected people saying their vote does not matter.
Yeah.
And some of the most affluent and some of the most privileged and some of the most powerful voting at almost 100% clip. Right. And so clearly there's a level of dispassion, ambivalence that has people kind of disconnected. And then there's these flashpoints like the one we're in right now.
Because you got to keep people, number one, you got to keep, and we have to make sure people understand that, yes, if you're fired up about doing something for Congress, yes, you got to vote in August, but November is going to be even more important.
Yeah. And so I'm coming in a second. I'm saying you had these flashpoints where something happens. And even if somebody does not know the totality or all of the nuance and the particulars, they like, something ain't right.
Yeah.
They wasn't supposed to do this.
Yeah.
But then the challenge becomes, to your point, how do you sustain that level of engagement over a long period of time that you don't just win back what was stolen, but you even protect some of the gains that you might make long term? So I don't think the average organizer or political has done a good job of honest inoculation over the last few years. And now people have heard so much this is the most important election in your lifetime that becomes what the scriptures would call a noisy gong and a clanging cymbal. So I think what we need to start talking about unapologetically is a 10 to 15 year plan for sustained engagement. We haven't talked about that. I haven't seen one. There might be one out there, so I'm not, if it is one, send it to me. I'd love to read it. I'd love to look at it. We know that Project 2025 is 900 pages.
Yeah.
And we know that did not pop up overnight. We know the Heritage Foundation been putting plans like this together for the last 50 years. And what we're living into now are their machinations and their evil visions of what the society ought to be. And so if those of us of goodwill want to see what the scriptures would say, God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven, then we have to write the vision and make it plain. And it should be a long-term vision, not just how you get the next person in office in the next election. And so that's the challenge, is how do you develop that sustained kind of engagement? Because what has happened in these flashpoints is we haven't done enough political education and inoculation. So the people are fired up. They go to the ballot box, so they go to the state capitol, and then they realize that they are up against, in the immediacy of that moment, an insurmountable task. And then they be like, well, it don't matter, which is not necessarily true. It's like you fight the elephant one bite at a time.
Yeah.
But you definitely have to keep taking your bites. And it's not just one bite at a time insofar as I only have to bite once. I bite, and then I bite again, and I bite again, and you bite, and you bite, right? So I think we have to do a much better job of sustaining that. I'm not sure yet what that capacity is or what that appetite is, but I know we are literally doomed if we don't do that.
To the folks out there who are, and we'll end on a faith note, because to the folks out there who are holding on to their faith in this moment, and we've seen, over time, how faith can be weaponized in ways. I mean, we got a president who people think was God's gift to earth, that God sent.
He think he God's gift.
Yeah, that he's Christ-like. I mean, this guy's beefing with the Pope.
Yeah.
To the people who are holding on to faith, or who are being suppressed by faith, or their idea of what they've been told their faith is teaching them. Mm-hmm. To the people out there saying, it's God, if it's God's will, but not pushed to action. To the people who are saying, well, my faith teaches me that, we've got to do this for our people, you know, all this some of this stupid stuff that people come up with.
I thought you were gonna say stupid shit so bad. I just wanted to hear you say that. So,
well, some of this stupid shit that people.
Thank you. Okay, right. I opened up the gates for you. There you go.
People come up with.
I just sanctified your cuss word.
That people come up with, and they try to use as a reason not to be engaged, and they try to make it about faith. Like in this moment, what do you tell the faithful?
So I think it was the Truth Out op-ed I wrote. There was a section at the bottom that talked about Freedom Summer 2.0, which is what I think we're in now. It says faith without organizing is dead. The scripture says God has not given us a spirit of fear, but one of power and of love and of a sound mind. And it also says God is able to do exceedingly and abundantly above all we can ask or think. And here's the part most people leave out, Hendrell. According to the power at work within us. So I deeply believe God wants this world to be more equitable. I deeply believe God wants fairness in our criminal justice system and equitable access to health care and people to be able to work one job and make wages that are fair enough to feed them and their family. And I think in order for that to happen, since God knows I live in a nation of laws, and people who propose and pass those laws are people who are elected to office, it becomes my divine duty, not just my civic duty, but I would say my Christian duty to give people access to the information that allows them the opportunity to be adequately engaged and involved. So it is our faith-based duty. If this is the world that we want to see, then we need to do the organizing that makes it happen. Yeah. We need to commit our own time, talent, and treasure. And we cannot be so elementary in our faith that we think all we're supposed to do is pray. Frederick Douglass said, I prayed to God to free me from enslavement for 20 years. And God never answered till I started praying with my feet. So obviously, some of us need to pray with our feet.
I mean, knock some doors, make some phone calls, get engaged, organize in the community. Thank you, Dr. Fisher.
Man, my pleasure, brother.
I'm glad you stopped by.
I'm glad you finally let me come. You know what I'm saying?
I gotta have you back. I want to make sure that the listeners, if you listen to this podcast, I mean, Dr. Fisher was just scratching the surface here. I mean, he's deep. He can go deep with it. And you all need to make sure that y'all are connecting with him. Dr. Fisher, Doc, you want to tell them how they can find you, how they can connect with you, how they can continue this conversation with you if they want to. Yeah. Or if they've got something that I didn't ask you that they might need to ask you. You know, how can they do that?
So one, not hard to find on any of the social media sites. Earl J. Fisher on Facebook, at Pastor_Earl on Instagram, Abyssinian Baptist Church. Memphis is on YouTube. You could do Abyssinian Missionary Baptist Church on Facebook, at ABC Ministries, the number 1 on Instagram. Email at abcministries, the number 1 at gmail.com. I also want to put a plug in. We mentioned earlier when we started talking about faith-based stuff, the Black Clergy Collaborative of Memphis. Google that. That is the local element and arm of a Black faith movement full of Black faith leaders, started by Dr. Jason Lawrence Turner, Senior Pastor at Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church. And then the statewide apparatus that you referenced earlier is the African American Clergy Collective of Tennessee. And so those are some places that I want to encourage all of the faith leaders to make sure you get connected to. But yeah, you can find me at Abyssinian. You can literally Google the Blackest Church in Memphis and Shelby County, and Abyssinian will pop up. And y'all can catch me there, man. Or, you know, Hendrell is my publicist now. So, you know, just send Hendrell. If you're looking for bookings out there, you know, if you want to set up an interview, you know, just give him his cut. And no, man. So I appreciate you having me, brother. But I ain't hard to find.
To the folks who are listening to the podcast, thank you for tuning in. We'll be back again with some more folks to talk about redistricting, to specifically talk about this splitting up of the 9th congressional district in Tennessee. And when I hit the road and I'm in South Carolina and Alabama and down in Louisiana, we'll have some more guests on. But I want you to make sure that you stay engaged. If you are in Memphis, make sure you pop up at Abyssinian. The doors of the church will, I'm sure, be open now. So continue to be engaged, continue to be involved, continue to ask tough questions, and never let anyone take your power from you. And right now, in this moment, one of the greatest powers that you have is your vote. So you got to make sure that you use it and explain to other people why it's important for them to use theirs. Like, subscribe, comment on the episode, share it with somebody who needs to hear it. And until next time, this is Politics Unfiltered, and I'm out.